Are you eating something every single day that may quietly be helping cancer cells survive inside your body? Most people think cancer begins suddenly. A bad diagnosis. A genetic mutation. Bad luck. But here's what's really going on inside your body. Long before cancer becomes visible on a scan, your internal environment is either helping dangerous cells grow or helping your immune system destroy them. And one of the biggest drivers of that environment is food. Now, this is important to understand clearly. No single food directly causes cancer overnight. Biology is never that simple. But certain foods create the perfect metabolic conditions for cancer cells to thrive. Chronic inflammation, elevated insulin, oxidative stress, blood sugar instability, gut microbiome damage, and weakened immune surveillance. And there is one category of food that modern research continues to associate with these dangerous biological changes more than almost anything else: ultra-processed foods. These are foods engineered in factories, stripped of natural fiber, loaded with refined starches, sugars, industrial oils, emulsifiers, preservatives, and artificial additives. Things like sugary breakfast cereals, packaged snack foods, or processed meats, soda, flavored yogurts, fast food, instant noodles, frozen processed meals, and many healthy low-fat products. What makes this especially dangerous is that these foods don't just add calories. They alter metabolism, they change hormonal signaling, they influence inflammation at the cellular level. And emerging research now shows strong associations between ultra-processed food intake and higher risks of several cancers, especially colorectal and breast cancer. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine your body as a garden. Healthy cells are the plants you want growing. Cancer cells are weeds. Now here's the key. Tiny abnormal cells can appear in almost anyone's body during life. Your immune system is designed to remove them. But when the soil becomes inflamed, overloaded with sugar, deprived of nutrients, and hormonally chaotic, those weeds suddenly get fertilizer. That's what ultra-processed food can do metabolically. And today we're going to break this down step by step, not with fear, but with clarity. Because the goal is not panic, the goal is power. You'll learn which foods create the biological conditions cancer cells prefer, why insulin and inflammation matter so much, so how your gut microbiome influences cancer risk, why processed sugar is only part of the story, and the simple daily changes that can dramatically improve your internal environment. And the good news is this: your body is constantly trying to heal. The moment you change the signals you give your cells, biology begins to change. If this kind of science-based health education is helpful to you, consider subscribing, because every day we break down the latest research into practical tools you can actually use. Key points overview. Today we'll cover 6 critical insights: why ultra-processed foods create a metabolic environment cancer cells love, how insulin spikes and chronically high blood sugar fuel abnormal cell growth, the hidden role of inflammation and industrial seed oils, why your gut microbiome may be one of the strongest anti-cancer systems in your body, how food additives and processing chemicals may damage cellular health, the practical nutrition and lifestyle strategies that help your body resist disease naturally. Core Section 1. Let's start with the biggest misunderstanding in modern nutrition. Most people think calories are the main issue. They believe, if I'm not overweight, my diet must be okay. But cancer biology is not only about body weight, it's about metabolic signaling. And ultra-processed foods send some of the most dangerous signals possible. Here's what's really going on inside your body. When you eat highly processed foods, especially refined carbohydrates and sugars, your blood glucose rises rapidly. Your pancreas responds by releasing insulin. Now, insulin is not bad. You need it to survive. But chronically elevated insulin changes the entire cellular environment. Insulin is a growth hormone. Its job is to tell cells energy is available, grow, store, reproduce. Cancer cells exploit this system. Many tumors contain far more insulin receptors than normal cells. That means they are especially responsive to insulin-driven growth signals. And this becomes even more dangerous when insulin stays elevated all day long because of constant snacking, sugary drinks, processed carbohydrates, and late-night eating. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine insulin as fertilizer. A little fertilizer helps healthy plants grow. But if weeds are present, fertilizer helps them too. That's why metabolic health matters so much in cancer prevention. Research increasingly shows that diets high in ultra-processed foods are associated with increased cancer risk and poorer long-term health outcomes. And one reason is because these foods disrupt insulin regulation dramatically. Think about what happens with a soda and fries. There's almost no fiber, minimal micronutrients, rapid glucose absorption, huge insulin release, inflammatory oils, low satiety. So within hours, blood sugar crashes, hunger returns, and the cycle repeats again. Over time, this creates insulin resistance, chronic inflammation, visceral fat accumulation, fatty liver disease, and immune dysfunction, all of which create conditions cancer cells can exploit. And here's something most people never hear. Even many healthy processed foods can do this. Low-fat granola bars, sweetened oat milk drinks, protein cereals, fruit-flavored yogurt, packaged smoothies. Some contain as much sugar as dessert. The packaging says healthy. But your metabolism responds to chemistry, not marketing. So what should you do instead? Focus on stabilizing insulin naturally. That means building meals around protein, fiber, healthy fats, and minimally processed whole foods. For example, eggs with vegetables instead of sugary cereal, plain Greek yogurt with berries instead of flavored yogurt, nuts and fruit instead of packaged snack bars, beans, olive oil, fish, and vegetables instead of fast food. You also want to reduce constant eating. One of the simplest anti-inflammatory strategies is allowing insulin to fall between meals. This is where overnight fasting becomes powerful. Even 12 to 14 hours overnight may improve insulin sensitivity and metabolic repair in many people. And sleep matters too. Poor sleep raises cortisol, worsens insulin resistance, increases cravings, and promotes inflammation. So if you truly want to reduce disease-promoting signals in the body, you cannot separate nutrition from sleep and stress. They are metabolically connected. And here's the empowering part. Your body responds surprisingly fast. Within days of reducing ultra-processed foods, many people notice better energy, fewer cravings, improved digestion, reduced bloating, more stable mood, and better appetite control. That's not willpower. That's physiology improving. If this is helping you understand your body differently, consider subscribing. Because the more you understand the science, the more control you gain over your long-term health. Now let's go deeper into one of the most important and most overlooked connections in cancer biology: chronic inflammation. Because cancer cells do not grow in isolation. They grow inside an environment. And inflammation changes that environment dramatically. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Inflammation is not automatically bad. In fact, acute inflammation is part of healing. If you cut your finger, inflammation helps repair tissue. If you get an infection, inflammation helps your immune system fight back. The problem is chronic inflammation. That's when the immune system remains activated continuously for months or years. And ultra-processed foods are some of the strongest dietary triggers of this process. Why? Because many processed foods contain combinations the human body was never designed to handle in large amounts. Refined sugars, industrial seed oils, artificial additives, emulsifiers, preservatives, oxidized fats, and nutrient-depleted starches. Together, these create oxidative stress. Think of oxidative stress like biological rusting. Inside the body, unstable molecules called free radicals begin damaging cells, proteins, blood vessels, and even DNA itself. And over time, this damage can contribute to mutations and abnormal cellular behavior. Research has shown that chronic inflammation is closely linked to cancer development and progression across multiple organ systems. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine your body is a house. Inflammation is like smoke. A little smoke while cooking is normal. But if smoke fills the house every single day, eventually the walls darken, the air becomes toxic, and systems begin breaking down. That's what chronic inflammation does internally. And one major source of this inflammatory burden is the modern processed food diet. Now let's talk specifically about industrial seed oils because this topic creates a lot of confusion. Oils like soybean oil, corn oil, cottonseed oil, sunflower oil, canola oil are now found in enormous amounts of processed foods and restaurant meals. The issue is not that these oils are poison in tiny amounts. The issue is dosage, processing, and imbalance. These oils are extremely high in omega-6 fatty acids. Your body needs some omega-6 fats, but modern diets often contain excessive amounts relative to anti-inflammatory omega-3 fats. And when these oils are repeatedly heated during industrial processing or deep frying, oxidation increases dramatically. That creates compounds that may promote inflammation and cellular stress. Now compare that to foods rich in protective compounds: extra virgin olive oil, walnuts, wild salmon, sardines, avocados, flax seeds. These foods provide anti-inflammatory nutrients that help stabilize cell membranes and support immune balance. This is one reason traditional Mediterranean-style diets continue to show strong associations with longevity and lower disease risk. But inflammation isn't only about oils and sugar. It's also about what processed foods remove. Ultra-processed foods are typically low in fiber, polyphenols, antioxidants, magnesium, potassium, and phytonutrients. These are the very compounds your cells use for repair and defense. So when your diet becomes dominated by processed foods, your body receives more inflammatory input and fewer protective tools. That combination is dangerous over time. And this affects far more than cancer risk. Chronic inflammation is also connected to heart disease, obesity, insulin resistance, fatty liver disease, cognitive decline, and accelerated aging. In other words, the same metabolic environment that feeds disease also speeds up aging itself. So what can you do practically? Start by reducing inflammatory load gradually. You do not need perfection overnight. One powerful strategy is replacement instead of restriction. For example, replace soda with sparkling water and lemon. Replace deep-fried snacks with nuts or roasted chickpeas. Replace processed breakfast foods with eggs and vegetables. Replace processed oils with olive oil or avocado oil when possible. Another powerful strategy is increasing colorful plant foods. Berries, leafy greens, broccoli, purple cabbage, garlic, onions, herbs, and green tea contain bioactive compounds that help regulate inflammation naturally. Some of these compounds even influence angiogenesis, the process by which tumors build blood vessels. This is one of the areas of research that William Li has discussed extensively. Food is not just calories. Food is biological information. Every meal either supports resilience or contributes to dysfunction. And here's something encouraging. Inflammation can begin improving relatively quickly. Studies show that dietary changes can lower inflammatory markers in weeks, sometimes even days in metabolically unhealthy individuals. That means your next meal matters. Not because it has to be perfect, but because your biology is listening continuously. And if this breakdown is helping you better understand the connection between food and disease, consider subscribing. Because every day we explore practical ways to build a healthier metabolism naturally. Now let's talk about something that may be even more important than calories, fat, or carbohydrates alone: your gut microbiome. Because inside your digestive system live trillions of bacteria that influence nearly every aspect of health: immunity, inflammation, metabolism, hormones, brain chemistry, and even cancer protection. And one of the biggest ways ultra-processed foods may increase cancer risk is by damaging this internal ecosystem. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Your gut is not just a digestive tube. It's an intelligent biological interface. About 70% of your immune system is closely connected to the gut. That means the health of your microbiome directly affects how effectively your body identifies and removes abnormal cells. Now imagine your gut microbiome like a rainforest. A healthy rainforest is diverse, balanced, and resilient. Different organisms work together to maintain stability. But if you repeatedly destroy that ecosystem with poor nutrition, toxins, stress, lack of sleep, alcohol excess, and ultra-processed foods, diversity collapses and harmful organisms begin taking over. That's exactly what many processed foods can do. Research increasingly suggests that diets high in ultra-processed foods and low in fiber negatively alter gut microbiota composition and increase inflammatory activity linked to disease risk. One major problem is the lack of fiber. Cancer-protective gut bacteria feed on fiber, not sugar, not processed starch. Fiber from vegetables, legumes, berries, nuts, seeds, and whole foods becomes fuel for beneficial bacteria. And when these bacteria digest fiber, they produce compounds called short-chain fatty acids, especially butyrate. Butyrate is incredibly important. It helps reduce inflammation, strengthen the gut lining, improve insulin sensitivity, regulate immune function, and may help suppress abnormal cellular growth in the colon. But when processed foods dominate the diet, fiber intake drops dramatically. Now the microbiome loses its preferred fuel source. At the same time, many ultra-processed foods contain additives and emulsifiers that may further disrupt gut barrier integrity. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine your gut lining is like a security wall. Healthy bacteria help maintain the wall, but processed foods weaken it. Eventually, tiny gaps begin forming. This is sometimes called increased intestinal permeability, often referred to as leaky gut. Now, inflammatory compounds and bacterial toxins can move into circulation more easily. The immune system reacts, Inflammation rises, and over time, this creates additional metabolic stress throughout the body. What the research shows is that chronic inflammation and microbiome disruption are deeply connected to colorectal cancer risk and systemic disease processes. And this helps explain why modern chronic disease rates have risen so dramatically alongside industrialized food systems. Now, here's the encouraging part. The microbiome can begin changing surprisingly quickly. Studies show measurable shifts in gut bacteria can occur within days of dietary changes. That means every meal is either feeding protective bacteria or feeding dysfunction. So how do you rebuild a healthier microbiome naturally? Start with diversity. One of the best things you can do is eat a wide variety of plant foods each week. Different fibers feed different beneficial bacteria. Try rotating. Leafy greens as cruciferous vegetables, beans, lentils, oats, berries, garlic, onions, herbs, nuts, seeds. Fermented foods may also help many people. Foods like plain yogurt, kefir, sauerkraut, kimchi, miso can support microbial diversity when tolerated well. And one of the simplest but most powerful strategies is reducing ultra-processed snacks. Because constant processed snacking creates repeated inflammatory stimulation while starving beneficial bacteria of real nourishment. Now, this does not mean perfection. Your body is adaptable. What matters most is your overall dietary pattern. Think in terms of daily biological signaling. Are you consistently feeding repair or dysfunction? And here's something fascinating. Certain beneficial gut bacteria may even improve how patients respond to cancer therapies and immunotherapy. Researchers are now actively studying the microbiome as a major part of future cancer medicine. That tells us something profound. Your gut is not separate from the rest of your health. It may be one of the command centers of your immune system itself. If this is helping you see nutrition in a completely different way, consider subscribing, because every day we break down the science of how to support your body naturally through food, metabolism, and lifestyle. Now let's discuss one of the most misunderstood parts of the cancer conversation: sugar. You've probably heard the phrase, sugar feeds cancer. And while that statement is directionally true, the real biology is much more important and much more nuanced than most headlines explain. Because the problem is not simply eating one piece of fruit or enjoying dessert occasionally. The real issue is chronic metabolic overload. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Every cell in your body can use glucose for energy. Healthy cells use it. Brain cells use it. Muscle cells use it. Cancer cells also use glucose, but often at an extremely accelerated rate. Many cancer cells are metabolically abnormal. They consume glucose aggressively to support rapid growth and reproduction. This phenomenon has been recognized in cancer biology for decades and is known as the Warburg effect. In simple terms, many cancer cells become heavily dependent on glucose and altered metabolic pathways for fast energy production. But here's the critical point most people miss. The danger is not only sugar itself, it's persistently elevated blood glucose and insulin levels over time. That's what creates a biologically favorable environment for abnormal growth. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine glucose as fuel. A small amount of fuel used properly powers a healthy system. But when fuel is constantly overflowing everywhere, dysfunctional systems can exploit the excess. That's what happens in metabolic dysfunction. And ultra-processed foods are uniquely dangerous because they deliver massive glucose loads with very little nutritional protection. For example, soda, the candy, pastries, white bread, sweetened coffee drinks, processed breakfast cereals, packaged desserts. These foods rapidly spike blood sugar because they lack fiber and structural complexity. Now compare that to eating an apple. The apple contains natural sugar, yes, but it also contains fiber, water, polyphenols, vitamins, antioxidants. That slows glucose absorption dramatically and creates a completely different hormonal response. Your body recognizes the difference between whole food structure and industrial food chemistry. And this is where modern diets become problematic. Many people are consuming glucose almost continuously throughout the day. Breakfast cereal in the morning, sweet coffee midday, snack bars in the afternoon, dessert at night, sugary drinks throughout the day. The body rarely gets a break. Insulin remains elevated. Fat storage increases, inflammation rises, and over time, cells become insulin resistant. This is one reason obesity and metabolic syndrome are strongly associated with increased cancer risk across multiple cancer types. Now let's talk about one especially dangerous source of sugar: liquid sugar. Sugary beverages are metabolically disruptive because they enter the bloodstream extremely quickly and bypass many normal satiety mechanisms. Your brain does not register liquid calories the same way it registers solid food. That means it's easy to consume enormous glucose loads without feeling full. And fructose-heavy sweeteners, especially in excess, place major stress on the liver. Over time, this can contribute to fatty liver disease, elevated triglycerides, insulin resistance, visceral fat accumulation, and systemic inflammation. Here's something many people don't realize. Fatty liver disease itself is increasingly linked to cancer risk and metabolic dysfunction. The liver is one of your body's primary detoxification and metabolic control centers. When it becomes overloaded, the entire system suffers. So what should you do practically? First, reduce added sugars gradually and strategically. Do not focus on extreme restriction. Focus on stabilizing blood sugar. That means prioritize protein at meals, increase fiber intake, avoid sugary drinks, reduce ultra-processed snacks, and build meals around whole foods. One incredibly effective strategy is changing breakfast. A high-sugar breakfast often creates cravings all day long. Instead of cereal or pastries, try eggs and vegetables, plain Greek yogurt with berries, chia pudding, protein-rich smoothies with minimal added sugar. Another powerful tool is walking after meals. Even a 10-minute walk after eating can help improve glucose regulation and reduce blood sugar spikes. Simple movement changes metabolism immediately. And timing matters too. Late-night eating tends to impair glucose control because the body becomes less insulin sensitive at night. Giving your body a longer overnight fasting window may improve metabolic flexibility and insulin regulation in many individuals. Now, this is important. The goal is not fear around food. Stress itself is inflammatory. The goal is awareness. Because when you understand how food affects your biology, you stop thinking emotionally about eating and start thinking metabolically. Food becomes information, signals, instructions. And the exciting part is this: your metabolism is adaptable. Even small improvements in blood sugar control can begin reducing inflammatory stress and improving energy relatively quickly. That's the power of giving your body better signals consistently over time. Now let's talk about something most people rarely consider when they think about food and cancer risk: the chemicals created during food processing itself. Because sometimes the danger is not only the sugar, fat, or calories, it's what happens to food during industrial manufacturing and high-heat cooking. Here's what's really going on inside your body. When foods are heavily processed, refined, preserved, chemically altered, or cooked at extremely high temperatures, new compounds can form that place additional stress on cells. Some of these compounds are associated with oxidative damage, inflammation, and DNA stress. And over years or decades, repeated exposure may contribute to disease risk. Now, this does not mean your body is fragile. Your liver, kidneys, immune system, and antioxidant defenses are designed to handle a certain toxic load. But modern ultra-processed diets can overwhelm those systems when exposure becomes constant. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine your body has an internal cleanup crew. Every day, this crew removes damaged cells, neutralizes toxins, repairs DNA, and keeps the system functioning. But if garbage trucks keep arriving non-stop every hour, eventually the cleanup system struggles to keep up. That's what chronic toxic burden can do biologically. One example is processed meats. Research from organizations including the World Health Organization has linked high consumption of processed meats with increased colorectal cancer risk. Foods like bacon, hot dogs, sausages, deli meats can contain compounds formed during processing, curing, smoking, or preservation that may damage cellular health over time. This does not mean eating one sandwich causes cancer. The issue is repeated exposure combined with poor metabolic health and chronic inflammation. And high-temperature cooking can also matter. When foods, especially processed carbohydrates and meats, are fried, charred, or burned repeatedly at very high heat, compounds such as acrylamides and advanced glycation end products can increase. These compounds may contribute to oxidative stress and inflammation inside the body. Now again, context matters. Biology is cumulative. Your body can tolerate occasional exposure. But modern diets often combine ultra-processed foods, fried foods, excess sugar, poor sleep, chronic stress, alcohol excess, sedentary behavior, and nutrient deficiencies, all at the same time. That creates metabolic overload. And here's another hidden issue. Food additives. Many ultra-processed foods contain emulsifiers, stabilizers, artificial flavors, sweeteners, and preservatives designed to improve shelf life and texture. Researchers are actively studying how some of these compounds may affect gut bacteria, intestinal permeability, inflammation, and immune signaling, especially when consumed chronically over long periods. What the research shows is that highly processed dietary patterns are consistently associated with poorer metabolic health outcomes and increased disease risk overall. But here's the empowering part. You do not need a perfect diet to reduce this burden significantly. Often the biggest improvements come from removing the most heavily processed foods first. For example, replacing processed meats with fresh protein sources, cooking more meals at home, reducing deep-fried foods, choosing minimally processed snacks, reading ingredient labels more carefully. One simple rule can help enormously. If a product contains a long list of industrial ingredients you would never use in your own kitchen, your body probably wasn't designed to consume it daily either. Now let's talk about protective foods, because this conversation is not only about what to avoid, it's also about what helps defend your cells. Many whole foods naturally contain anti-cancer compounds that support detoxification, reduce inflammation, and improve cellular resilience. For example, broccoli and cruciferous vegetables contain sulforaphane, berries contain anthocyanins and polyphenols, garlic and onions contain organosulfur compounds, green tea contains catechins, turmeric contains curcumin, tomatoes contain lycopene. These compounds help regulate oxidative stress and support healthy cellular communication. This is why dietary patterns matter more than isolated nutrients. A protective diet is not built from one superfood, it's built from repeated daily signals. And one of the most powerful shifts you can make is simply moving closer to real food. Food that looks like it came from nature, food your grandparents would recognize, food with fiber, color, texture, and natural complexity. Because the body evolved around real biological information, not industrial chemistry. And here's something hopeful. Your body is constantly repairing itself. Every healthy meal supports that repair process. Every better choice lowers inflammatory burden. Every improvement in sleep, movement, hydration, and stress management strengthens your internal defenses. If this conversation has changed how you think about food and long-term health, consider subscribing, because every day we break down the science of healing, metabolism, and disease prevention in a practical way anyone can apply.